now in your sermon, that the words that are heard and the words that are spoken will be found well-pleasing in your sight, you who are our rock, our strength, and our place. Amen. The scriptures this morning come from two different places. The first is from the book of Genesis. It's part of the second creation account. In the day that the Lord God made the heaven and the earth, when no plant of the field was yet in the earth, and no herb of the field had yet sprung up, for God had not caused it to rain upon the earth, and there was no one to till the ground. But a stream would rise from the earth and water the whole face of the ground. Then God formed human from the dust of the ground, and breathed into those nostrils the breath of life. And the human became a living being. And from the third chapter of Paul's letter to the church at Galatia, there is no longer Jew or Greek, there is no longer slave or free, there is no longer male or female, for all of you are one in Christ Jesus. Today is, as you have heard, no doubt, World Communion Sunday. Today we think about the yearning that we all have for unity amongst the peoples of the earth. Well before Christ, we know there was this yearning from the prophet Isaiah. In days to come, the mountain of God's house shall be established as the highest of the mountains, and shall be raised above the hills, and all the nations shall stream to it. Many people shall come and say, "Come, let us go to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, that God may teach us God's ways, and that we may walk in God's paths. God shall judge between the nations, and shall arbitrate for many people. They shall beat their swords into plowshares, their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore." Wow. Nothing could be further from the way it is than that, is it? The wars and divisions we see everywhere between nations, the animus and hatred within countries based so often on race. But our faith will not abide this. Our faith does not ignore it. But our faith says we will have none of it. In both of our scriptures that I read to you, our faith holds to Isaiah's vision. In Genesis, we learn that all people are one. When God knelt down and scooped up that muddy clay, there was one human formed. And from that one, well, here we are. What a beautiful rainbow of people. And in Galatians, Paul pretty much wipes out any thinking that allows for distinctions or differences between people. He took the biggest, most important, most divisive issues he knew. Male and female, slave or free, Jew or Greek. In the law of the day, these were the bellwether divisions, the bellwether battlegrounds, taking no prisoners. Yet, he said, there isn't such a thing, Paul said. We are all one. There seems to be here, maybe more than one of you are thinking, some pretty idealistic thinking. That everyone came from the same beginning and that everyone belongs to everyone else. What is this thinking? Is it just more saccharine nonsense served up by a starry-eyed preacher? Wouldn't it be nice to have some reality-based talk, real-world talk about this? Do you ever get tired of lofty, grand images from the Bible that are out of our reach? Barry, if you show the picture. The girl on the left is named Marcia. The girl on the right is named Millie. One is white. They came came from the same womb, from the same father. When we look at this picture, something shifts inside of us. What we think of as reality is rattled. Thank you, Barry. I want to tell you briefly, very briefly, about the latest scientific understandings of race. This is going to be whirlwind. You'll need to listen fairly closely. And if you want to know more about this, I suggest you start with the April 2018 National Geographic, from which I learned what I am going to share. And I thank Karen and Amy for sharing that magazine with me. Working with genetics, a group of scientists gathered samples of DNA from people all over the planet who self-identified as being members of different races. They then did a long study of this DNA, and in 2000, at a White House ceremony, the findings were presented. The lead scientist stated, "The concept of race has no genetic or scientific basis." I want to repeat that. The concept of race has no genetic or scientific basis. This research, he goes on, has revealed two deep truths about people. One, all humans are extremely closely related. Everyone has the exact same collection of genes with only slight variations. And two, in a very real sense, all people alive on the planet are African. All people on the planet are African. But why the tweak, you ask? And how the colors? Much of the difference correlates to latitude. Near the equator, lots of sunlight makes dark skin useful as a shield against ultraviolet radiation. But toward the poles, where there is too little sun, paler skin promotes the production of vitamin D. Conclusion: science today tells us that the visible differences between people are accidents of history. They reflect how our ancestors basically dealt with sun exposure and not much else, these geneticists and scientists tell us. Race is a made-up concept that doesn't really exist. We are all Africans. And I know that must come as a great shock to some of you Scandinavians who just can't imagine. When we go all the way back, friends, our longest ago ancestors, black. Now, this science doesn't for a second take away from the rich heritage and incredible gift of diversity. Viva la colors! Amen. What would a rainbow be if not for the different colors? But what this does mean is that valuing people differently based on color is absurd. It is ridiculous. If it didn't cause so much pain, we should just be breaking out laughing. We are all one. Isn't it something how our scriptures and science come up alongside each other? The ancient story of Genesis, God made all creatures from the exact same clay. And we are all one. There is neither Jew nor Greek, slave nor free. We are all one. We belong to each other. On this World Communion Sunday, we hunger for a no-nonsense lens with which to see the world, and our faith, when understood correctly, is that lens. Race has been used to justify all sorts of injustices and persecutions our faith and science tells us that we are sisters and brothers the world over. I close with a story from my life. As my life unfolded, I have had ample opportunity to reflect on my journey with what I now see is the made-up construct of race. I was raised in the South by parents who, while they were kind people, clung tenaciously to the flawed claim that race separated people. That there are differences in how we are valued and treated based on race. I attended segregated schools in Orlando, Florida. I graduated from high school the year before Dr. King was murdered. I was, in short, saturated in the polluted waters of racism. And I have tried to reflect over the years, what was it that got into me, that kept calling me to know that that was wrong, that something was wrong, that led to this lifelong struggle I have, that I continue to have, to rid myself of this deadly plight and struggle with others to stop the reign of cancer in our world of racism. And so often when I have reflected on my life journey and what could it have been, what got into me, I come back to the same incident. I rehearsed it and thought about it so many times. My younger brother Coleman and I, probably at the time somewhere at 7 and 4, 8 and 5 when it happened. Our family had a maid. The color of her skin was black. Coleman and I had really gotten into the N word. We were in the side room of the house, the door was closed, and we thought it was so funny. Two little boys well on our way to being infected with racism, just going on and giggling. When the door to the room opened, the woman with the black skin looked at us and then sat down in a chair and leaned forward and told us, "Honeys, we are all people, and we're not supposed to hurt each other." And that word, that hurts me. When I relive that moment, there are still feelings I have. One, of course, sorrow, mortification, the deepest regret. But there is another one. It is something approaching a pure love, a connection, an affection, affinity. You know what it is? It was like she was my grandmother, who saw so much more in me than I saw myself, and who cared enough about me to call to me to be a more loving person. She lived out the reality that we are one human family. We are one human race.